Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello and welcome to the Theory Forge, Ashen Forge. Wow, new year. I'm just so thrown by this new person we have on the show right now that, wow. But yeah, it's a new year. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the new and improved legendary Neurotoxin.
Who was legendary Neurotoxin? I am the foreign exchange student. Hello.
He just popped up on us like this with no warning, and I thought somebody was in the wrong server for a minute. But it looks good, I have to say. But Diggs and I think have only known you with the beard. So
a very long beard, so I don't think we've ever even seen the shape of your jaw before.
I've trimmed it down a bit before.
Yeah, but
that was probably
so
like
see your jaw.
Yeah. Yeah. So the long story short with this one, there's two angles. There's one is it started as an unemployment beard, and then when I had gotten the job that started in 2014, it kind of became the people's beard because so many people liked the unemployment beard that they're like, you got to keep that. That's great. And it's like, okay, well then it's the people's beard. It's the people's, whoever wanted to have a beard but can't, likes a beard, can't get their beard like this, just beard enthusiasts in general. Sure, it's your beard. It's the people's beard. But you know what? After being in a pandemic for a couple of years now, I don't think the people deserve a beard. Mask up. You got to get a better seal. Stuff's still whack out there, still dangerous. And I'm finding myself needing to be in contact with people a little bit more in various settings than I had been recently. And of course, if it comes to, having to work somewhere that doesn't have great ventilation, then, I got to be able to wear a mask and just something comfortable all day. And that's that. So that's the one. The other angle is, hey, why not? It's just hair. If I really don't like it that much, then it'll just grow back, and that'll be that.
But yeah, that's very true. That's my take on things as well. So when I get to this length, it's just because I'm lazy, basically. Well, it is the new year. We skipped 2 weeks just to go through Christmas, New Year's. Hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and New Year's. And here we are. So there's really not a lot new as far as Ashes, obviously. They also took a break for the holidays. So we're kind of ready just to start off whatever we would like to talk about. There are some threads. There was I think there's a tank discussion dev discussion that they posted about threat. There was an interesting forum post that is now many pages long about things we don't like about AOC. Again, I think I feel like at the end of the year, for whatever reason, well, I think we might know the reasons, but at the end of the year, it seemed like things kind of took a little bit of a change for Ashes. Prior to all this, everything seemed to be they could do no wrong. And, there were a lot of loud voices in the last two live streams. So that has sort of continued. But yeah, so we can go any which way. I think Diggs is still playing WoW. Neuro's still playing Destiny 2. I've started back on Rose Online.
I'm still playing Warframe when they have new content, but it's really few and far between. I think it's just going to be another year or so before they get out not just Deviri Paradox, but the the sort of content pipeline they said they've now set up all the stuff for, well, now they have to fill that content in and deploy it, and that takes time. So, just like any studio that wants to take their time and make the lore good and cohesive and, take things in new and interesting places for a universe that's already expansive and, completely wild. I know there's plenty of ways they can go with the story at this point. They can, spread out across the known universe even further, or they could advance the story in, a way that kind of slightly reduces your ability to access previous things. Not entirely, but it's one of those things that it's the non-FOMO live service game. They don't really get rid of anything. You can always play through and replay content that exists. It's very grindy, but that is something that, compared by comparison, something like an MMO where each new expansion not only adds new content, but it changes the rules differently and significantly. Like when WoW started having shamans and paladins on, the other side or whatever, and having a lot more flattening out of the rules and various sorts of things like that. And the actual nature of the game and how you play it would change. Same thing would even happen PlanetSide 1 a lot with PlanetSide 2 from beta, like just beta to launch, and then first year of launch. Things changed considerably. That's the sort of thing where I really like that we're going to have a lot of change and a lot of change in the world with Ashes of Creation. But what I think we're not going to have is giant swings in the rules and mechanics. If something's overpowered, they might make more counters or weaken it in some way, or add, better ways to anticipate that it's coming, so it can be, the skill of getting out of the way of it can be a little bit easier. But I would imagine there's going to be a lot more of what we're seeing with like Destiny 2, for example, where they've cut out content as they go to the next annual season. The quarterly seasons from the previous annual kind of get squished and tossed out, and you can access parts of them, but not in an accessible format as you could while that annual seasonal content was going on. It's completely a different sort of thing even still with Ashes of Creation, because these are things that were in the world to begin with. That these are things that it isn't a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. It's like, all right, we're going to do this expansion, and all new and existing servers are going to be changed in this way. That's not going to happen. Whatever sort of changes like that are going to occur is because the players prompted it through various events and consequences. The most common one I expect to see is that heavy PvP Gankfest servers are almost immediately going to get corrupted and overrun, and they're just going to get booted to the next most stable PvP server, or a few of them get consolidated, and it just keeps on going and they can spin up new ones as the old ones get collapsed. But I imagine those ones are just going to be corruption factories, and so people aren't even going to be focusing on the big problem. They'll just be fighting each other and all the posturing and everything. And, that's one sort of thing. But when people kind of get out of that loop and, as things kind of go on along with that, because things are going to go on anyway, cool things will still happen. The idea of them still only happening once, maybe, if you get the right consequences and circumstances on any given server, and when they come early versus come late versus come never, that also has some very interesting things. It could be 3 years in, some servers have a storm that some servers manage to push back, but then at the 7-year mark, that storm comes through, and there's way more like build up and progress and things that storm knocks out because people are that much more invested. That's the sort of stuff that I'm excited for with Ashes. How much it's going to kind of satisfy that sort of like almost the thing you want, but also the thing that you know you're gonna have to grind to complete in some ways, or to get the things you want, like the expansions with MMOs. It's that we're not going to need to have something like that. We're just going to have so much dynamic content and interesting stuff, and stuff that they do add after day one is stuff we still might not have, been able to have figured out anyway. So it would be arbitrary to, continue sneaking more stuff in, which I'm sure they will.
Yeah, kind of the intriguing aspect of that for me is the concept of not necessarily, you definitely can't complete everything because stuff goes away um, over time. It's not going to be the same game. You don't experience, newbies are not going to experience the same thing that older players, veteran players experience, which I'm hoping really leads to more communication. When you're playing a static game and everybody basically plays the same story, you don't have to talk because you don't have to ask any questions. You already, everybody has the same experience. But when you log in and you're like, oh, what happened to to that town or city that used to be there the last time I logged in?
Whoops, it's
Right?
gone.
Where did that go? Um, but yeah, the notion that you were talking about grind to complete things, but you might not ever be able to complete them. You might be trying to complete that dungeon, but it goes away before you ever got the gear that you needed or the augments that you wanted, um, before your specific group configuration found a decent strategy to defeat that content. It might be gone. So um, that's an intriguing aspect of playing a dynamic game versus a static game.
Well, I know it sounds weird. I still think you could do seasons in something like Ashes, but I mean, that's essentially what expansions have been known to be. World of Warcraft have been introduces something different, right? Every expansion, and whatever the previous expansion was, just kind of basically goes away. But I'm curious when we talk about these things. When we first interviewed Steven, we asked him about expansions, and they planned on something like quarterly small rollouts and then yearly big expansions. But yeah, it's like how do you do that in this, like what does that mean to them when you have servers that are so drastically different? I'm still also very curious about whether or not we get to a point where things get so bland, people get so stuck in their ways, like, oh, this is the easiest way to play the game, that they just have to introduce something to disrupt the player structure.
I was looking at the roadmap for Dragonflight, and twice this year they're supposed to be adding a new zone. Seems new for World of Warcraft to me. Um, but they've been saying that they're kind of adjusting, what players want, and how they're doing their updates is going to be different this year than before. Um, so it seems I mentioned that because it seems like, well, if WoW can do it, then maybe Ashes will be able to do it as well. Because it's easy to say in the design, we're going to do all these updates and you'll be able to quest forever and we won't have an end game. But I've heard other games over the last 15 years kind of, well, even EverQuest, just it's in the name. You're supposed to be able to EverQuest, and those quests run out typically. Um, and I'll say again with Dragonflight, one of the nice things is I've been max level for 3 weeks or so, and I still have side quests that I haven't completed because they're available still. You don't out level the quests, so when I'm ready, I can go jump on those um, side quests. But I have plenty of other stuff to do.
But that's true now of any of it, right? You can, like, if you never went through one of the traditional old zones. It scales with your level, right? So you can go into any of them and do the
because of
quests.
scaling.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing. I enjoy that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know. Well, it's the new year, so what should we start with? What
Well, I have another thing
Tatzelworm.
about Dragon.
Okay, I gotta say that
Go ahead.
one. I saw the thing, the ice gauntlets on Facebook, and I gave them a little this and that on there. It was kind of a funny sort of thing to see, but I kind of thought about it more, and it's like I like the idea of the creature, the Tatzelworm from the Swiss Alps. It's like a snake with a cat face that breathes poison breath and has like a ear-shattering, horrifying screech. That's awesome. That is a cool creature, just to be a creature. But celestial dragon god Tatzelworm blessed those gauntlets. That's like, come on. I don't know about that one. That sounded a little silly. I really hope that was just like a throwaway name they gave marketing, because it would seem a little weird to me. And I'm not going to say they have to do this, but for all the awesome folks they've got there, and all of the lore heads, and all of the technical folk, and the people that the Venn diagram overlaps with all of that, to be able to create a like a language for the different whatever you want. If maybe that was some sort of ancient, like proto super being language, like the equivalent of, I guess, angels would speak it, or celestials, or whatever. That's what the name comes from, and then you make a name that actually comes from that language. That sort of thing would be cool. But I feel like just taking random names of things from mythologies and using them on things, that's once again going back to like Warframe and Destiny. That's a great way to name your weapons and your armors and stuff. Taking like a Nordic theme, and having guns with like horns on it or something. That's cool, fine, whatever. In fact, actually, that's not correct. I don't know if they did the horns on the helmets. That was Wagnerian opera that made that up. But like, if I understand a lot of what they're trying to do is take bits from various different cultures. In fact, that's one of the things I think we're going to be talking about. And I like having representation across different cultures and styles and people, especially to be able to do it for both the human and non-human folk. So if you want to play somebody that's like a real world human equivalent, you can make your humanish character look like that. Or if the hopefully not tropey, but like non-human race that also kind of has some of those characteristics, if you decide you want to play them as well, that could be the thing. I kind of think of the trolls from WoW in particular, that like, well, the having that kind of pan island, Caribbean sort of accent, and kind of leaning heavily into like the voodoo and tribal sort of stuff. That kind of seemed a little weird. That it's like, okay, so they're doing that, but humans wouldn't touch anything like that, right? So that's kind of what I'd like to see, is make a little bit more of like your own unique sort of stuff. Make up new names, make up languages, take things that exist from existing languages, and like put them through some sort of randomizer blender sort of thing, and have it generate a new language for you. There's, I'm sure, programmers on the team that have probably already found ways to make their own like lore language systems, or have already at least thought about it. So you just, if there's maybe 1,000 words that you want everybody to kind of be able to speak and be readable across languages, just throw those 1,000 out there, give some parameters, throw them through a blender until you've got words to represent all the languages, and then you can start basing things on that. And even if it ends up coming out sounding like Tatzelworm, it's maybe going to be spelled a bit different, and it's going to have a completely different context. So then it's coming from more of a unique, even if somewhat generated sort of generated and curated sort of perspective. I love the gauntlets themselves. They look great. And I wanted to make sure that was clear when I made the post, not denigrating the gauntlets or, the people that are doing this stuff. Just that one name just felt like a throwaway name, and I really hope it doesn't stick.
I was not too thrilled by the color scheme. That everything is blue and white. I think the armor wouldn't be, right? Like I can see building a ice castle out of ice, and having that reflect ice, but I don't know. I'm just my initial response to that was I'm not a fan. I wish they would do something that looks more Inuit or um, Alaskan Native, uh, um, which is basically fur. um,
I get
but
you.
as I was listening to you talk about it, I was realizing that, of course, if they have uh, like red and black lava themed armor, they're gonna have a ice themed armor in terms of appearance. And for some reason, I don't mind the lava themed um, armor, but the ice one just seemed a little bit too over the top. And then I was thinking maybe that's because you don't have that are living literally among lava, like in the same way that people live among ice. Um, but then I was thinking, but we had a thread that was fairly
Actually,
popular in the last.
when you
Go
take
ahead.
it out from the underground, it becomes magma armor. Sorry, I had to.
I feel you. The we had a thread the last couple of weeks on the forums about whether or not we liked uh, transmogs. I like them because I'm fashion over function, and I want everything to look nice and match. And it's much better to have that opportunity than to look at people who are just mismatching their best in slot gear, and they don't care what it looks like as long as it's gives them the power they want. And so I was just thinking, when I thought about that, I was thinking, oh, it could be really cool though to get an ice armor set, uh, but use it as the cosmetic transmog, and really have it magma or lava armor. And so people are expecting they're going to be facing someone who's ice based and they're really lava based or fire based. That could be kind of fun. Um, so yeah, I don't know that I'll buy anything from this one, um, but yeah, I guess people who want their to look like they're made out of ice, they have options.
That actually does bring up a very good point, because there will be in-game items that don't look like the ones we can purchase, but they are like I'm not even going to say like the B and the C list versions of the items. It's we made 10, 5 or 10 cool models for each different piece of equipment, and we've curated one specific allocation of those for the whole skin, but you're going to find other pieces and be able to have them customized to look like the ones that were the runner-ups that we didn't go with. Still the same high quality, just not the ones we chose for that skin. So that's where you're going to get the real confusion, is when people are wearing the items that do look like the real deal, And then among them, you do have somebody that just got the, oh, well, I look like I'm wearing the armor because I've got the skin on. Tee-hee. No one will ever know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that I could see, if the appearance also correlates with some bonus or benefit that it imparts. But at the same time, I also have no idea, is this the sort of thing that we're going to see people wearing, like whole guilds wearing suits of, or is this a sort of thing where one piece of each exists in the world other than the skins? And if you're the dude who's got all of those pieces, golly, those ice dragons better watch out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have a target on your back for anybody that gets the quest to steal the ice dragon armor because they were corrupted and then said, Ice dragon, help me help you. And it's like, all right, kill that dude.
Lots of people will have targets on their back.
Yes, they will.
Cosmetics continues to be a big topic of conversation in some of the forum threads of in favor or not in favor. I think actually most of it comes down to some of the things we've talked about. It's not entirely clear still, which is, I think, part of why it's so frustrating as to what skins you're going to be allowed to use where and on what level, what level of freehold. I think there's some frustration when you buy these armor pieces. You can't separate them. You have to wear the entire armor set. You can't just wear, the pants or the gloves. So, and not
what
not
would
an
really burn people is if it turns out the size doesn't matter because you can actually scale the size of it. It's just a set piece, and then the things you would actually use it for, you interface a sign on the front that lets you go in, and then you instance in. That would probably drive people nuts because they thought they were going to have this big grand tower and that they could, put the different levels with the different stuff and the different accoutrements. And, oh man, it'd be so cool. And then, nope, that's not how it is. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that's I really want to see like a lot more of what's going on with those. And then ships was the other one. I got confirmation that the skin for this one, I believe, was for a frigate-sized ship. I guess I would need to go through and see if I think they may have given the size classes of ships, but I don't know if it's exactly clear with each ship that they've offered what class of ship that you'd be able to put it on. So that's another level of confusion. And like I've said with both, I want to know what it looks like, the shapes, the surface area, where you can hide, where there's windows to attack out from, all of that sort of stuff. That's it's going to be a skin, but the skin is going to have a shape and it's going to have features that are potentially different.
Yeah. I mean,
Like if a ship has like the crenellation or wherever, it's got the little slots to shoot out from and hide behind, but it's otherwise the same attributes as a ship that doesn't, well, that's potentially an advantage that you have purchased, even though it is functionally part of just the appearance. And if it doesn't work like that and your decoration is just illusory and you can shoot through it and it hides in a battle or something, well, people aren't really going to enjoy that either.
yeah.
So these are the things, like, we understand what putting skins on equipment on the gear you wear is. That's clear. There's still the unknowns that we would definitely like to see more with. And I know that there might be some amount of, we don't want to show it till we're really ready to show it because there's no backsies. And there might also be a little bit of why tell it when you can show it, or why show it when you can have them play it, sort of thing. That maybe they've been holding out till like right before the next beta, but that may have potentially kept getting pushed back. And so, it could be that they want to demo it, but certain things need to be in place still, or they want to do it relative to certain events in a certain way.
They, you mean Steven?
No, there's a team of people making decisions.
There's a team of people making decision, and the bottleneck is Steven. Like
Making suggestions.
Well, meaning we still don't have nodes 3, but also again we don't have those last 2 know your nodes articles. They've been written. Every time I've asked about, hey, when can we get those? Well, they've been written. They're waiting for Steven's approval, and Steven doesn't want to because they're still making changes to the node system, and he wants it to be perfect before articles. We can't even read articles and have them like, okay, hey, we changed something.
So
Well, it's because the moment it goes out, people are going to talk about that version, and when you issue an update, not everybody catches that, and when people are trying to look at things, they're going to find the bulk of the initial conversation, not the corrected version later.
I get it. I'm just saying that's why Steven bottlenecks it. So no, we're not going to see stuff until he's ready for it to be ready. And I think he's been burned enough. Now he got his little fingers singed. So he's like, nope. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
So we don't have to keep going on about cosmetics, but this is again where I take an issue with how they do this. So you were talking about the ship. I was looking. It doesn't specify the type of ship in the text.
No, I had to ask about that on Facebook.
Which is a great point, because you're right. Stephen has has mentioned what types of ships there are in past live streams, and none of these have actually said what they function, what the size is. But when you read the text, this is just, I mean, if you aren't aware, if you're not paying attention, we've covered this show or this game like every day for 6 years. If you haven't, you read this. It says icebreakers have 3 traits that normal ships lack: a strengthened hull, ice clearing shape, and the power to push through sea ice. I read that and I think, hey, this actually has some sort of function. It has a powerful hull. I plan to be a pirate, right? I mean, that's what I read. And then there's this asterisk that if you take the time to notice it, then you have to scroll through all the rest of the page to go find it at the bottom. It says, oh, flavor text. I don't know. That still just drives me a little nuts. But moving on. So there was this dub discussion on threat mitigation from a tank perspective. Have either of you played a tank very often, Diggs? I've really never heard of you talking about tanking anything.
I mean, I think I've had a tank before. Yeah.
Neuro?
I've played a tank in. I played a tank. I had a tank in the Alpha 1 too, as well.
I did have a response I gave them, but it was a little bit more about the just the mechanics of tanking in general. Threat mitigation, it's such a weird sort of thing to me. An enemy trying to choose who they're going to attack and why and for what reason. Especially I think of the idea of these ancient and incredibly intelligent dragons and other beings, and that when you're fighting them, they don't utilize modern sort of or above beyond like the quality of thinking that average tacticians or whatever would just kind of have. No, instead what they do is, I'm going to attack you for a little bit. Oh, you pissed me off. I'm going to attack you for a little bit. I'm going to attack you for a little bit. Oh, you're not dying. I just need to keep attacking you. Oh, you're not dying. I just, that's dumb. I like the idea that you shouldn't just be able to rely on one dude being up front, taking all of the shots on their shield, having a bunch of people healing them, and everybody else trying to do just enough damage and just enough this and that to manage all of the ads and not take all, take the aggro from the boss. It's just such a weird dance, and I'd really like to see battles against bigger things and tougher things done in a way that's, that feels more to scale, honestly. The
So what does
idea
that
of,
mean? Explain that.
yeah, I was going to explain that. So what I mean is, why are 40 tiny little dudes and dudettes and other duderinos going in with like harpoons that they can't even throw, and they're just strapped to their back, and they're trying to fight this giant thing? Why are they not, as a bare minimum, bringing in siege weapons? Why are they not bringing in some sort of like mobile artillery carts and things? Why are they not bringing in stuff that will allow them to do world changing amounts of damage, like explosives and volatile chemicals, and using that sort of stuff? um that's the sort of thing that I kind of feel like it's missing. And
Is that
I
what you do in Dungeons and Dragons?
it feels weird in Dungeons and Dragons for four people in above average magical gear to be able to take down a beholder or a dragon, like an adult or older dragon. It feels weird that it's just an attack is just you hit or miss, and if you hit, you do this much amount of damage. It's not okay. And if a real person was out there wearing magical armor, they would A, probably die from the impact, or B, be torn apart because their magical armor didn't hold up, because this is a 20-ton dragon with claws the size of a small car all crashing down on you. Like, you're dead. You're dead.
No, you're talking about physics, not magic.
Yeah,
So,
and so
magic. That's
that's
not
the
true
thing.
of magical attacks, right?
That's always the thing that's kind of funny to me, is this like superhuman power of small person not getting crushed, knocked far off in the distance or whatever when they're hit by a gigantic creature. It's not like Skyrim when the giant kicks you at the beginning of the game. That's what fighting a giant should feel like, damn it.
If you don't have a magical defense, yes. If you're only relying on physics, and yeah, you're gonna feel the literal physical impact. But
And
if you have
so
magic, you can
Can I
bypass
can I
the
point
physics.
out that soon, when you bring up Dungeons and Dragons, we might have to pay a royalty, so we'll have to be careful about that.
the the thing then, for the sake of Ashes of Creation, is it that you're trying to manage its essence or something? Like, I don't tanking has always just been a weird sort of thing to me. The idea of the best way to tank something is to not get hit by it, be able to dodge out of the way if you almost get hit by it and get to somewhere safe, and then maybe have magic protection. But actually sitting there and having the thing hit you, that never seems like a good idea. And that's kind of like a different sort of form of tanking, but I do like the idea of trying to, hit and run something, and being
Oh,
able to attack from different angles.
so we did not call it tanking back when we were just playing tabletop D&D back in the day. Um, but typically you're going to have a fighter or warrior or a cleric um, trying to maintain the focus of your boss so that a rogue can flank it and get that extra damage from flanking. Um, Your cleric is probably not going to be, I mean, they're going to be healing, but that's not the only thing that they're going to be doing, like is typical in MMORPGs. So I think once we got to MMORPGs, they kind of, I don't know, dumbed it down and made it so that, yeah, we have a literal tank, or at least that's the way people played. Um, and then you get it dumbed down to DPS, right? Which is not a thing that it really exists in D&D. And these became important mechanics. I would prefer to not focus so much on one tank, because there's one boss and you're just trying to hold the aggro of one boss. I kind of wish, in this sense, that our final battles or our big battles are actually closer to um, 8v8. Like if we're taking in a group of 8 and we expect that to be the, um, I would want 8 very powerful uh, bosses at the end instead of a big boss and a bunch of little minions that we're trying to, that those extra mobs would not be ads, but it's group versus group or raid versus raid, that you're really getting there at the end, um, rather than this thing that has 5,000 or 10,000 hit points, when you have, a few hundred. Um, so yeah, I wish that those ending battles would be actually more on scale with whatever the players are expected to bring. Same thing kind of for monster coin battles. I wish those would be the levels of what we're fighting would be closer to whatever the levels of the players expected to be there are.
See, I dislike this question. Just the root of the question. It tells me the AI is not going to be that smart because when I see a question like this, I feel like the classical MMORPG tank is a result of just very dumb AI. It is. I put in the text and the chat there an example. If we as a group encounter a boss and at 50% health, the cycle is to spin up 2 healers. Well, what does the raid leader do? They yell at everyone, switch targets, right? Switch to the healers, kill the healers, bring them down. Why does the boss continue to hit the tank when it has healers that are healing the tank, right? It's because the AI is just not smart enough to determine where the actual threat is. That was part of the promise with utility-based AI and EverQuest Next that was so interesting in talking to Rodolfo and all of them, was this concept. And it wouldn't have done away with the Holy Trinity either. You would still need healers, tanks, and DPS, but it would be AI in a much different way that it was smart. It would say it would calculate, threats continuously rolling, and at some point it's going to realize this healer over here, that's the problem, and it's going to directly go after that healer. And again, I don't think that means you shouldn't have tanks, but it shouldn't be you push a button, shout at the thing, and it turns back to you. Like there should be some sort of physics involved as well. The tank should be positioning themselves. They should be intercepting some of this stuff, some of the damage. That's sort of where I would like to see tanking. So this question just sort of drives me
Well,
nuts. But
my biggest problem with the concept of having a tank is that works on mobs. It doesn't work on uh, players. So if you have a game that's heavy in the PvP, I mean, it's kind of pointless because you can't hold aggro. Um, but I think I was not expecting the EverQuest Next AI to be, I wouldn't say smart, but one of the things that I liked about them in terms of threat is not necessarily figuring out that they should be like the healers are the major in this particular battle. The healers are the major threat, or in this particular battle the rogues are the major threat. What I like is them just deciding that, like, I actually hate Pyre, and I'm gonna attack them first. I'm gonna focus on them regardless of what the classes are. I'm focusing on them because I don't like them, or um, especially rogues. Maybe they think of them as thieves, or especially if the thieves stole something, they're going to go after the people who have the thing that they want back. Um, so that's kind of what I liked about the EverQuest Next scenario, is that they might have their own reasons, even though we think that they should be going after the person doing the most damage or the person that's doing the most healing. Um, they just hate Nakua, so they're going after, if there's a Nakua in the group, they're
But
going to try and get the
yeah,
Nakua first.
and that's the part too, right? So it might not always be the healer, and in that instance, the answer might be tank gets in between the two, and the healer stops healing, and that reduces the threat on the healer, and it introduces more, I think, complex gameplay. It introduces more. You have to pay attention more than just to circles on the ground. You actually have to put attention to your output, what spell rotation you're using for the specific instance. And then the encounters, they change too. That was the other thing that I really loved about that concept, right? You could go in with 5, and maybe you have a traditional healer, a cleric, and the next time you go in with 5, you don't. You have a paladin healer or something, and the encounter is entirely different because the makeup of the group's entirely different. Therefore, the threat or the perceived threat that the boss you're trying to kill is entirely different. And so you don't have this sort of consistent. At 75% health, it does something. At 50, it does something. At 15, it rages. That's what was so really neat about this concept. That's why I was really sad to hear Storybricks never actually entered into a code base. But one day.
Yeah, and I think that is supposed to be somewhat the case with Ashes of Creation. The encounter is supposed to change from session to session. So, I mean, that's what Steven said. I don't know how they accomplished that or to what degree, but I mean, he says that, some of the minions will be a little bit different, all that. But we have to have hands on to know what that's really going to feel like, or how close they're going to be able to get to
I mean, this is entirely
implementing
possible.
it.
I wish they would. I wish someone would put an effort into creating this sort of thing mainstream. I just really, it certainly is possible if we can train things to recognize tumor, tiny tumors in lungs better than a physician can. I mean, I would think we can train AI to do other things. It's just, I assume it is a lot of money and a lot of time. And the amount of time it's taken to get combat anywhere close to correct, which many people disagree with right now. Can't imagine how much it would take a studio, a startup studio, to do something like this. But
Well, and more
I
importantly for me is in 10 years, right? We heard about Storybricks almost 10 years ago. And so it would be nice to have people in the AI sphere working on something similar 10 years later. You would think that okay, maybe it's too difficult to do in 2012, 2013, but 10 years later, it should be somewhat or even significantly easier. Hey, I mean, look at all those AI art apps that are out now creating the paintings and digital art. That's some of it's really cool. Maybe the AI can create decent AI. Who knows?
yeah, and then the world ends.
Nah, it's just video games. We can teach an AI to play poker. It doesn't mean it's gonna, actually be allowed to win poker. AI personhood. We programmed it to play poker. You just want that person who made that AI to be able to get rich. Stop.
Well, what are the?
I was gonna say, to the contrary with tabletop role playing games, when I think about tanking, it isn't that the enemies are, in general, like it can change from depending on the encounter, but it isn't usually that the enemies want to be chased from behind and whacked by somebody when there's somebody close enough that they can whack. So your casters and your mid long range attackers are off at a distance and trying to make sure they're not the one that the big clubby thing is trying to attack, and the person who you do want the big clubby thing to attack, you put them forward. The big clubby thing might slowly try to like walk around the person, and so you'll have to kind of keep pacing around to slow their pace. But in doing so, you give your ranged people enough time to spread out and continue keeping their distance. So that's part of kind of how I feel like tanking goes for tabletop games in a lot of ways, is for at least a single target. I mean, the smaller stuff the range people can mitigate, but for whatever your big target or targets are, you only have them attacking people that are close range, frontliners. If they don't recognize or want to respond to those frontliners and try to keep going, you'll walk by them and they'll get an attack of opportunity. And as you keep trying to get away from them to attack the other things, you're potentially opening up for more opportunities for them to get easier hits on you.
But again, I think, and especially because we have a DM who's there who can, decide what the challenges are going to be. Often more likely, it's going to be a group that is on par with the players. And you might still have one that's a little bit bigger than the others. But again, even without the big bad, the rest of the enemies that you're fighting are going to be formidable for your player group as well. And you don't get that as much in MMORPGs. But the other thing that happens in D&D that tends not to happen in MMORPGs is that you can get diseased, right? And that disease might last even after the encounter is over. So, right, even if you defeat the threat, but sometimes you might not be able to because you've been hit with, debilitating effects.
MMORPGs used to follow that. I mean, early EverQuest, early EverQuest, even early WoW. I mean, there wasn't a ton of, there were a lot of things out there that would kill you. And we talk about the not big bads that were still dangerous. But as we were talking about before show digs, I think things have changed. Part of the I don't want to say dumbing down of the genre, but the making it easier, I guess, is a better way, is just, I think, entirely time related. Diggs and I were talking about how, when we all started MMORPGs back in the 90s, right? There wasn't a group of 40 and 50 somethings above us that had been playing for 20 years, right? So we were the target audience. So that is where the games made their money. We had time because we were much younger, didn't have families. And so you could enter into contracts with these games like this where you just spent 10 hours a day in EverQuest. But now, you look at where we're at now, I think you have to, as a developer, follow the money. And so, are you more likely to get the majority of your revenue from people who are still, in their teens, early in their 20s, or are you going to get most of your money from the people who are now, in their 40s and 50s? And, I think the answer to there generally is going to be the people who are in their 40s and 50s and who are more firm in a job and a financial situation. And so
them and their kids.
Well, but what does the people who are in their 40s and 50s that are more financially stable, less likely to have time? So that's where you start getting a lot of the bending towards reducing time involved into doing things. And I just, I don't know, that could be a much bigger topic, but I don't know.
Yeah, and even with Steven, he was what, 7 or 8, something like that, when he first started playing, and he's over 35, 35, and gonna be late 40s by the time this thing gets out. So even he doesn't have the amount of time to play MMORPGs they used to back in the day.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, it was in the context of flying, actually. That's how it brought up, because you mentioned you can fly anywhere in World of Warcraft, and in Throne and Liberty, it looks like we'll be able to, as our, the players themselves, which it looks like transform into flying creatures.
mhm.
And you know how the stark difference between that and Ashes of Creation not allowing flying, the obvious trade-off being the ability to sort of travel faster. Although I guess that stays in the vein of what Ashes is trying to be, which is a very hardcore, time-intensive MMORPG that has a very specific audience. So
It
Well,
just
it's
makes,
also that
again,
the changes going on in the world on the smaller and the longer scale. Every time you go down that road, it's different road. You know, things will have changed. Things are different. Trees and rocks and things might be out that used to be there. Different creatures, things that you used to encounter there have been replaced by something else that's taken over. So I think that's something they want to focus on is the smaller scale, just like road from town A to town B to town C back to town A, just doing that loop like once a month. And, you know, that's, you're going to see a whole lot of stuff going on.
well, that would be the case anyway. I'm just saying I find it fascinating that you have a game like World of Warcraft, which now you can get anywhere you want to go, and you can do that fairly easily. And it seems like that's going to be the same case for Throne and Liberty. I mean, that's why I moved to World of Warcraft from EverQuest, is because just comparatively, um, EQ2 still had a whole bunch of invisible walls that you had to run into to zone to the next place. And World of Warcraft was comparatively seamless. Um, and then even when I would zone on EverQuest 2, it would take forever for me to actually zone into a place. And even if I was zoning in World of Warcraft, it was a couple of seconds at most. So it was just easier to play World of Warcraft. And I feel like that might be the same thing with just traveling and trying to get to where you want. I can just hop on my dragon and go where I want to go for the most place in World of Warcraft right now. And it seems like the same thing will be in Throne and Liberty. I can just turn into a bird or turn into some canine or something and run where I want to go. Um, and then if I'm going to be playing Ashes and it's like, oh, well, this is going to take forever for me. It's going to take, 30 minutes just for me to get to the place I want to go. Which game am I going to choose?
Well,
exactly.
you know, if you don't have that much time to play, you know, the one that caters to that will definitely have an audience.
Well, we're almost out of time, but specific to the question, actually, we didn't answer the question. The question to this, well, one of them, would you prefer threat mechanics to be a part of combat initiation or throughout the entire duration of combat? I think if you only do threat at the very beginning, that sounds very stupid. That's something, otherwise, what's the point of a tank? Like, oh, I waved at you.
Stupid is not the word I was going to use, but yes, go
I mean,
for it.
it's like
I agree.
I waved at you. Now you have to pay attention to me the whole rest of the encounter. Like that's what. Okay, what's the tank do then? Are they DPS?
The only reason why I could think to do that is an anti sneaky tapping system. So you try to be the one that gets the first hit on it, and you do, and then instead of trying to attack all the other people that are actually going to end up killing it, it chases you around. You think you're going to hide in the corner. Nope, here it keeps coming. It's not going to ignore you. It knew where you were last at and just starts breathing fire. Eventually, your stealth runs out or whatever, and then then it gets you, and then haha, they were able to get a head start because they got to get free attacks in while it was attacking you. I don't really see that threat mitigation starting at the beginning of the encounter. unless otherwise they mean you only send the people that are tanking in first, and those are the only people that are up close. That doesn't make sense either, because there's a lot of melee classes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Um, it also said, "Do you enjoy holding threat as a big part of combat?" Again, I feel like that is the definition of a tank at this point. So I don't understand what the alternative would be to this question. I mean, I do. I just don't think they have it. It would be a change to the AI. But so my 2 cents would be yes, a tank's role at this point should be continuous threat building and keeping whatever it's his or her or they target is on them. I mean, otherwise, there was a response to that question, something about, well, I want to be I want some threat, but I want good DPS, and I'm you're a tank. Why if you want to be DPS, go play something else. I don't understand. Like we have roles, that's why it's called a tank. You don't see healers saying, well, I want to heal you sometimes, but I really want to be good at DPS. Although I guess I've said that with the Shadow Priests, but anyways. Well, we are out of time, but we are back rocking and rolling, and I believe we will be here next week. I don't think any of us have a reason not to be. We have no word yet on anything. Next live stream, Alpha 2, testing groups, nothing. So hopefully we'll get
There was one other one, actually. They've been really, really active on the on their Facebook, and I want to bring that up again real quick. Because they've been putting the posts out like rapid fire, and some of them are the ones that we know about already. Some of them are just art posts. They brought up the graveyard golem. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. How difficult do you think it should be to take down larger foes? Which harder? Maybe. Depends on the level discrepancy, perhaps. Depends if they've got an elite tag or not. We talked about the tanking. They asked, danger comes to those who look for it. Do you try to avoid conflict in video games or actively seek it out? And then there's another one here. Rivers are perfectly safe in fantasy games, right? What horrors would you find in a river near a cemetery? Well, other than a kappa, of course we're going to find a kappa there. Don't leave your bum hanging out. Bog bodies. And then we ride trees here in Vera. Would you like to befriend one of these? This was the garden mount skin. So they've been posting a whole bunch of stuff. Troll flying on a rocket. The bird. Did we talk about the bird last time?
I don't remember.
It's a one-eyed scavenger that's like white and slightly bluish, like basically an ice vulture, but it's got one eye for some reason. So
these are the same ones that are on Twitter. I normally get because I think they advertise on the forums through Twitter.
Yeah.
But I never pay attention to their Facebook actually, but it looks like exactly the same.
Yeah, the same posts. Whatever platform you want to see them on, I'm sure they put them on all of them. The one-eyed bird is just the weirdest one to me. It doesn't, seem like it would help. Depth perception is kind of important for things that fly, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's it. They keep on posting stuff, so if there's not too much else to talk about between now and next week, there'll definitely be things they're posting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone have a great week, and we will see you back here next Sunday.
Yeah. Later, all.
See ya.